The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Don't miss out on the last few weeks of football action with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the playoffs. The app is simple. Pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Download the Prize Picks Daily Fantasy Sports app today and use code FIELD and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code FIELD on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game. Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.
I'm Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. This is not your typical Amateur Traveler episode. This is a first in what I'm calling the more travel or the bonus episodes for Amateur Traveler that are going to put back some flexibility into the format for Amateur Traveler. The plan is that these episodes will come out periodically on no particular schedule midweek, and that the Saturday schedule for destination-based episodes on a one-week itinerary would continue. This particular episode focuses on the topic of solo travel. Tell me what you think. I'd like to welcome to the show Beth Santos, who is the founder and CEO of Wonderful and the author of Wonder Woman, and has come to talk to us about solo travel. Beth, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
I appreciate having somebody that I know on this kind of a new experimental episodes here talking about topics. What's your connection with solo travel? So when I say solo travel, people assume that you must be single and you're traveling on the world because you're single.
Yes.
That is not
single,
your story.
Wild, living free, camping in Nepal by myself all the time.
Wild and living free, I believe is true. But
I do live very freely. That's true. Yeah. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. I have 3 kids and a husband. And yes, I love to travel alone. And I think any parent listening to this probably understands that. And I think that there is a gross misconception that if you like to travel alone, it means that you have no other option. Like you have to travel alone because you don't have a partner, you don't have family. But actually, one of my very pointy perspectives is that traveling solo is something that's very good for you, especially if you have other people or you're a caregiver or you have children or whatever, that it's not a way that you have to travel all the time. It is a choice that you make to travel for a certain reason. And when you do, it does great things for you. So anyone can do it.
Yeah, and I'm a mixture. The kids are out of the house and having grandkids, but I travel solo about half the time, in part because my wife doesn't want to go to all the places I want to go.
Yeah.
And is okay with me. Now, if I said I was going to someplace she wanted to go, and I was going to go solo,
that's it. All bets are off.
That would not work.
So that's called How to End Your Marriage. Yeah, go somewhere that your partner wants to go to and just leave them behind. Right.
Now, does your husband also solo travel, or does he just travel less because he doesn't travel as much?
The latter.
Okay.
Yeah. He'll travel. He travels for work. He has come to love traveling because of me, I think. And he never really traveled much on his own before meeting me. And now, yes, he takes some of the things that I like to suggest and thinking about, we're jumping in a bunch of different circles, but even just redefining what solo travel is to begin with, which doesn't have to be taking a 2-week vacation by yourself. It could be you have a business trip and you're tacking on a couple days to explore the area and you're doing that on your own. And yeah, he does that. I think he's learned to see the world in a different way. And so he thinks about his ability to travel alone more than he did before he met me. So I'd like to think I had some influence on that. But in general, no, I'm the one who would travel nonstop if I could.
And let's talk about, so you're a woman traveling solo. You don't just talk about solo travel for women, but you do have an emphasis on that a bit in what you're writing and podcasting about. But
Yeah.
let's talk about safety. I don't think it's the biggest issue, but it's the perception that it's the biggest issue for solo travel. So are there
It
places you
is.
wouldn't travel solo? How do you travel solo safely?
I think this is a very important question. And I say important because we are told that it is the most important thing. We are made to believe
Right.
that safety is the most important thing. And if you look up women traveling solo, that is by and large the first thing that's going
Is
to
it
pop
safe
up.
to travel to blah, blah, blah?
Is it safe
Yes.
to travel to all these lists that come top 10 safest countries for women to travel?
Right.
And those lists they just drive me insane because for a number of reasons. First of all, you can't rank an entire country. Like everyone who's listening to
Mhm.
this, I hope that you're well traveled enough to know. And you don't even have to be. You just have to be from a place to understand that
Right.
places are different. Parts of places are different wherever you go. You
Neighborhoods
can't
are
rank a whole
different than
country. A
cities, yeah.
neighborhood is different,
Mhm.
yeah, versus a city, versus a state, a region. So first of all, those lists are just completely bogus. But second of all,
Those lists are created because that's what people are searching for.
they're clickbait.
Yep.
Exactly. And they're doing a great job because everybody's clicking on them, which is a self-perpetuating cycle.
Sure.
Right. This is where marketing comes into it because it is so easy. Things, scary, fear-mongering, very
Yep.
black and white things are very easy to perpetuate because, right, of just how
Yep.
simple it is to say, this place is unsafe, don't go there. The thing that needs to be perpetuated more is the nuance of everything, which is safety depends on many factors. It
Yep.
depends on what we just talked about, where you are, like very locally, hyper locally, but also who you are. What
Yep.
do you look like? What language do you speak? What physical abilities do you have? How much have you traveled before? Do you
Right.
have any trauma that affects how you look at the world? And I don't think we are examining that enough. And actually, I write about it in my book. I give it, my editor was like, you have to give it a name. I was like, okay, my name is your personal risk profile. Ding. Everyone has a different personal risk
Sure.
profile,
Mhm.
which is a place that's safe for you might not be quote unquote safe for somebody else. But then you
Mhm.
can go into this whole story of what does safety actually mean? When we micro analyze this, are we talking about getting killed? Are we talking about getting robbed? Are we talking, and if we are,
Right.
what statistics are you using to evaluate that? One time I was given a survey that asked me to rank how I felt walking down the street in different places. How I feel is not
not a
just
good-
related
yes.
to how safe it is. It's also related to how prejudiced I am.
Yep.
Let's call a spade here. I might feel unsafe, but that's not because it's actually unsafe. It's because I'm a jerk. I don't know. It could be.
It's
So-
not you, Beth, in this case, but
or even
Yeah.
I don't mean to call
No,
everybody
but
a jerk.
it
Either
could be
perception
that you're
is
also
not.
naive. I am
You're
very
naive.
suspect when anybody says I was there and I felt safe. I
Mhm.
don't feel that necessarily is very well calibrated for everyone who says that. If
Lee.
you've traveled in a lot of places, I would suspect that your radar is probably better tuned to
Yep.
your surroundings. But even with that, I don't know that's a good predictor. Have I heard bad things about the area and therefore I'm predisposed to be looking for, do I feel
Yeah.
safe? Yeah.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
what do you
Yeah.
really do with safety? How much
Yeah.
do you worry about it? And then how do you deal with it in practical ways?
So I think that in all of this, blowing through this idea of no, safety is not, let's be honest. Let's talk a couple of
Yeah.
honest things. First of all, when you are alone, yes, technically you are less safe than if you are surrounded by a group of people gearing to protect you.
Right.
So you have to make choices for yourself. Sometimes you have to rely on your gut. Your gut may or may not be right in that circumstance. Let's remember that too. Your gut may be wrong, but also, and I don't mean wrong like you made the wrong choice, but wrong, you are acting on bias or prejudice or naivety or whatever, but you don't know. So you have to trust yourself. You have the emotional labor and the mental labor of having to make all these decisions. You're the one who's deciding where you're going to go. Usually that's a great thing. That's to travel
the best
alone.
and worst part of solo traveling. Exactly.
The best and worst part is that you have to be the one to ask how to use the bus system. You have to be the one to talk to the person, whatever. So I think, yes, there are things you should be thinking about from a safety perspective that you might not have to think about when somebody else is there, because that other person might have thought of it. Oh, the lock is working correctly. I know where the hotel is. I know how to use the transit system. All these things now, they fall on your shoulders. So I do think that there is a level of safety you should take into account. But I also think that from the places that we've been before and the places that we've been raised in, we have an understanding that we can use. And I think I talk to people sometimes. I live in Boston, who will be traveling from Boston to, let's say, Portugal. My family's from Portugal. And they'll say, oh, well, what do I do? And I'm like, well, you've used a subway system. You live in a city. So use your city knowledge and senses. And I think sometimes because we're going into a place we haven't been to before, we sometimes forget that those places, yes, they have a lot of differences, but also they have a lot of similarities. You have a lot of savvy just in the place that you live. And in fact, you might be overconfident in your home city because you're like, oh, I know how to use the subway, no problem. Right. And that might be where your guard is really down. So I think safety is for sure something to think about, but I do not think that it should be the number one thing. And I don't think that it should be the thing that's keeping people from traveling in the first place. I think the other thing that a lot of people are up against actually is just loneliness. I actually think that's the thing that keeps people from kind of wanting to get out there.
Probably the bigger issue than safety is loneliness.
Yeah.
Because I travel solo, I said, but yes, do I get lonely sometimes when I'm away for a week? I do.
Yeah. Yeah. And you take it in different ways. I think some people, they are extroverted and they are meeting people. And a lot of people say, oh, when I travel alone, I'm never by myself. I'm always meeting somebody. Right. Sometimes that happens, but also you have to put yourself in those situations sometimes in order to do that. And I do actually, this is an arguable perspective, but my arguable perspective is, as a woman, I do think that works in my favor. I think a lot of people feel comfortable approaching me more than maybe if I were a man. And so I do have the ability to just, if I want to, sometimes when I don't want to, be approached and to make a friend. And I also recommend to people, if you are a really extroverted person and you want to make friends, sign up for walking tours, stay at a hostel, go out and go to a meetup, find a group of people and go on an organized excursion. And so I think there's definitely ways to do it. But I think in our community of women travelers, actually the thing that really gets people, that really scares them, is eating in a restaurant by themselves. It's like the number one thing.
So much. My wife still does not feel comfortable doing that. And I've done it for so many years that it's just not a deal anymore. It's just
it's not a big deal. And I
remember there was a movie, it was a Steve Martin movie, and I want to say it was, I'm trying to think of what the movie was, Lonely Guy or something like that, where he walked into a restaurant and there was a spotlight on him. And it was so funny because a lot of people have that perception that you walk in and people are wondering, I wonder why they're alone.
Did they get stood up?
Like most
do
people
they not have any
really
friends?
Have time for you, but
right. Most people are not paying attention. But I do. Yeah. Even I tell people, when I believe that travel happens everywhere we go. I don't believe you have to go thousands of miles away in order to travel. And so for people who are thinking about traveling alone, the first thing I say is go out and eat. Go out and eat. Go to a restaurant by yourself. It could be a new place you've never been to.
Yeah.
And just have dinner with yourself. And a couple things are happening. Number one, you're knocking that one off, the reason of not to travel alone list. Like, you're already doing it. Get yourself comfortable with it. But second, and I think some people
are you doing that with or without the phone and with or without the podcast?
I recommend you bring a piece of physical literature, like a book or a journal. I actually really love like a travel journal. But yeah, to your point, I don't like to go, and this is a personal preference, but my recommendation is not to go digital, because digital has this like absorbing quality. If you're sitting there and you're totally focused in on this podcast because it's so engrossing, because I know all of Chris's podcasts are, you're not really sitting in the discomfort with yourself. And you need to sit in that. You need to be with yourself. And I also believe, and this is what some people agree and other people are like, you're full of BS, Beth. But I really do believe this, which is, especially women, I think women are told from very early in our life that it's not okay to be comfortable with ourselves, that we shouldn't be single.
Really?
that we shouldn't be alone, that we should take our friends to the bathroom, that we should be walked
Okay, well,
home,
that one I've
that
always
we
wondered about, but
we're told not to be comfortable with ourselves, that it's not okay, that you're going to be an old lonely cat
spinster.
lady if you a spinster,
Cat
that
lady.
it's yeah, things to that. But it's true. I think we are very much discouraged from having comfort in our own presence with our own selves. And even to the point of eating out at a restaurant, my first thought is somebody's going to think I got stood up, that I was on a date and I
really?
got stood up. It's the first thing that comes to my mind, honestly, because what woman is going to go out by herself? She's always surrounded by friends and other women. I see a lot of men eating alone. I see a lot more men eating alone than I see
Sure.
women eating alone. Doesn't mean that men don't have reservations as well, but I see a socialized difference, a gendered
Interesting.
difference.
Yeah, I think there are
Yeah.
some advantages in my case of being in my 60s now is I don't care what other people think. It's like, it's just not
Yes.
important to me.
I have learned the bliss of that in my not so elder, but elder years in my 30s and now approaching 40. I'm like, wow, I really love this feeling of just not caring. It's
Yeah.
great. So I can't wait to continue to not care more in my life.
There are things to care about. There are many wonderful things to care about. You have at least 3 or 4 of them. So
3 or 4, depending on the day. Yes.
yeah, so that's why I've been married 42 years. I understand.
But it's true. No, and I think, and that's why somebody said to me once, do you believe solo travel is for everyone? And I used to say no. And by the way, I'm even though I've said I'm a jerk already on this podcast, I'm not a jerk. If you're going to say to me, I traveled alone and I hated it, I'm not going to be on a soapbox and very
Right.
presumptuously be like, well, you did it wrong, even though that's what I do believe. But what I mean by that is I really, truly believe that traveling alone is good for you like a vegetable is good for you.
Mhm.
And you might try vegetables and you might say, ugh, not really for me. I don't like them. But that doesn't mean that it's not good for you.
Konnichiwa, I'm Yuki, a tour leader with Explore. Who knew that hidden among Tokyo's towering skyscrapers was a peaceful tea house surrounded by ancient trees and serene ponds? Actually, I knew. It was my mother's secret sanctuary. Not everyone knows about Tokyo's Hamarikyu Gardens. Arigatou gozaimasu. But you will if you explore. Search exploreworldwide.com. And don't just travel, explore.
Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike big wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
So
And yeah,
for you personally, what
Yeah.
about solo travel? What are the best parts of solo travel?
solo travel gives you a chance to connect with yourself outside of the context of home and your
Mhm.
relationships, your family, especially your family. And I think who we are is so influenced by what is around us and who is around us that the only way to really step outside of that and to meet who is on the inside is by leaving that context.
And what
And-
have you taken away from that, though? What have been the benefits for you of getting
to
more
know
in touch
myself
with
better?
Beth Santos, yeah.
Of course, everything. I think when you can take yourself outside of your home,
Mhm.
then it gives you a lot more confidence when you come back to be that person, to feel
Yeah.
more true to yourself. That's a healthy thing. But I also think that it teaches you, you learn things about yourself when you travel. Oh,
Right.
things that I like or dislike, things that I do well or don't do well, things I'd love to improve about myself, things that I do
Mhm.
great that I didn't even realize I did before. I think it hones those skills too, decision-making skills,
Right.
safety skills, absolutely. Trust skills, conversation skills. Those are skills that then you can use in your career when you're working
Mhm.
cross-culturally,
Mhm.
when you're working overseas, when you're traveling a lot for work, when you're just interacting with other people with different life experiences from you. And I think that creates a much richer life for everyone. It affects the way you operate at home, it affects the way you operate at work, but it also gives you a deeper understanding of yourself. And really, at the end of the day, how can you not benefit from that? I think it's so valuable. But to that point, I don't think everyone is going to love it,
Yep.
at least in the beginning.
Mhm.
I don't think that it's going to be something. And if you are struggling, I think it's like a learning opportunity to say, okay, what are the things that are really making me uncomfortable here? Is it that I really just hate being in my own presence? Why is that? Or is it that this thing is really hard for me? And then I'm going to shut up because I could talk about this forever. But
But
it's
it's okay.
like
We're gonna move on to some other things soon, but not a problem.
it's like when I went to grad school and I was actually responsible enough to make my own education decisions. Not that I wasn't in undergrad, but anyone who's been through that journey understands. And like I was there and I remember, and I would enroll in classes that I didn't like that were hard for me because I knew I had to learn the thing. Not because I just wanted to. And I think that's similar. Does travel always need to be hard and a learning opportunity? No, we can also go
No.
on vacation. I get that. That's sometimes we just want to rest. But also, these are moments for us to improve as people. This is life improvement stuff that you can really do. And trips help you to do that. They take you outside of yourself and you're exposed to the world, which is so much bigger than sometimes you realize when you're home. And that is going to shape the way you think about things. Yes, it
Yeah, I
gives us
find
so
for
much.
me that the two confidence, I think, is a huge thing. I also see twice as much when I'm by myself than I do
That's
when
so
I'm with
true.
my family. I
That's so true.
change my pace. I don't
Yep.
worry about the fancy meal. I do
Yep.
grab and go, and it is a
Yep.
pace that would be uncomfortable and wrong for me to try and enforce
Yep.
on my family, because I have at times. We've learned
I
that
agree with that.
this is not good. And even when we were traveling as a family, there were some times that it was Chris needs to go off and explore the Palatine Hill in Rome, and Joan and the kids and the friend who's traveling with us need to get ice cream and go back to the hotel.
Yep. Chris needs
And
Chris time.
yeah,
Yeah. You're
it's
absolutely
not
right.
just Chris needs Chris time, is they need ice cream time.
They need ice
And
cream
they have
time.
seen enough for today, and that is okay.
Yeah. And you're true. And I love that. And not having to negotiate with another person,
Mhm.
I think is wonderful to be able to just say, yeah, I want to do this. And right, I want to spend an hour waiting for the Louvre. And then I get there and you know what? I only want to stay 15 minutes. And I don't have to explain to anybody
Right.
why I'm being so ludicrous about that, but I just
Yep.
have a feeling and that's just what I want to do. And you just do it. You just do whatever
Well,
you want.
and
Yep.
I find for me personally, when I do those trips, then when I'm with my wife, it's like we get to do what you want, because I know I get to do my own trips where I get to
Mhm.
decide everything. And so this trip is yours. And I can
Yeah.
be more selfless in that trip
Yeah.
because I've got my own in
Yeah.
some
I
ways.
love that.
Yeah.
Well,
So
and yeah.
we've decided we're going to travel solo, or at least we're going to give it a try.
Okay.
Practical advice for the different stages. So a planning part. So I'm planning a solo trip. How does it differ from planning a trip with your family or a group trip or
Yeah, I think first of all, there are so many more choices because you have to make all of them. And that even just comes down to destination. You don't
Sure.
have another person to say, I want to do this. I want to go here, or I don't want to go here. So I think sometimes just narrowing that funnel can be tricky. Or sometimes that's the easiest thing because you're like, this is where I want to go. I already know this is what I want to do. But those decisions are a little bit different, just how you're planning. Now, a lot of people who travel alone are also thinking about budget, because
Sure.
budget does, if you're not sharing and splitting things with two or more people,
Yep.
then yes, that hotel room is going to be. So I think having a good understanding of what your budget is and what you do want to spend money on. But also, I'll have people ask me about what comes up a lot. I speak a lot at the Travel and Adventure Show, and what comes up a lot is the single supplement, the dreaded single supplement.
I
And
was
this
just
comes up,
thinking of that. Yep.
yeah,
So
this
we're
comes up
talking
a
about
lot.
cruises and tours
Right.
where you have to pay additional money to have that room to yourself or that cabin to yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
Because usually they're expecting that second person.
Yep.
And so if there's no second person there, you're basically getting a whole room for yourself for the price of one person. So they increase that price. And a lot of
And
people
on
who
a
are,
cruise, that can be double, literally
it can,
double.
yeah, it
Yeah.
can.
So you're
And
paying for your spouse to be there, whether she's there or not.
whether or not they're actually there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because it is, when you ask about the single supplement, some people That is something a very real problem because of the
Yeah.
type of travel they do.
Mhm.
Other people have never heard of the single supplement before because they're very DIY travelers. They haven't been
Right.
on a cruise. And there are some companies that do have sales where they waive single supplements. If this is
Right.
something that's a concern for you, you
Mhm.
can look out for those. But then also, there are actually one thing I love to recommend to somebody who is worried about maybe the embedded costs of traveling alone. These small group tours
Yeah.
are fantastic. And I absolutely call them solo travel because you don't know the other people that are going on this tour. So,
Right.
a multi day small group tour. Intrepid does some really fantastic
Mhm.
ones. We actually run some with Wonderful. There are tons of organizations that do them now. And you get the benefit of being in this small, intimate groups. You can still eat dinner at restaurants. You're not
Right.
going to a big place with 50 other people in a bus. But sometimes, depending on the group, you can be paired with a roommate or they look for lodging that's a little bit more suitable to groups of singles. It'll be like
Right.
rooms with twin beds. So I always encourage people to look for that when they're planning.
And when I have done that by myself on I think of the amateur travel trips that we've done with Intrepid.
Yeah.
And if I'm there without my wife, I'm usually paying the single supplement and getting my room to
Yeah.
myself. I snore. It's good for everybody.
Yeah.
But I've had people who were on the trip who were strangers who decided to be roommates who I think are still friends. They
I love that.
just really enjoyed meeting the other people on the group. When you do something a little adventurous, when you're going to Morocco or someplace like that, which is the recent trip we did, you're finding people who are a little adventurous.
Yeah.
And it tends to be an interesting, fun group of people in my experience.
Yeah. We have wonderful trips that we run. And
Right.
it's a similar thing
So
where
these are
we'll
women only
say,
trips.
they're women only
Yep.
trips. And we'll say, would you like to have a roommate? And usually it's just enough for somebody who normally would want a room for themselves, but wants to
Yep.
save money to say, it's another wonderful woman. I don't know her, but I know that she's in the same organization
I
that
know
I'm in.
about her.
And it's another
Yeah.
woman, right? I know about her. I can connect with her. We have a member
Mhm.
app. I can send messages to her. We can
Right.
be friendsies before. And then we go, and yeah, and it's like just enough that everyone feels comfortable enough that, yeah, I'll have a roommate. Well, why not? It'll be extra fun. So I think, yeah, those are great opportunities to do that.
I'm
What else
trying
is
to
different?
do a tour down the coast of Africa, looking at a
Which
cruise that
coast?
both actually, but the West Coast is really what I'm looking for.
So
And
cool.
the problem is the single supplement.
Yeah.
It is twice the cost if I do it just solo. And I have some
Yeah.
friends who are interested in doing it. I was like, I don't even know if I want to be roommates with them. And
Yeah.
yeah, and then the issue is on some cruise lines when they talk about solo cruising, they're thinking singles. That's
Yes.
not what I'm looking for.
Yes.
I'm not trying to hook up.
Yes. That is something that I've noticed with cruise lines, especially that the singles meetups are exactly that. It's dating related. And
Right.
I wish that we're just traveling alone. We're just looking to meet other people and hang out and make some friends. Absolutely. And by the way, I know we're talking about things like sharing rooms and which I understand for some people, they're just like, I'm not sharing a room. I am whatever, too old for that, or I have needs that I don't want to share a room. And I do want to bring up something that I think is really important. We've mentioned hostels, but
Yeah.
also I have noticed that there are wildly different expectations about what hostels are. And hostels in the 80s,
Well, they've
yeah, they were
changed.
like, they've changed a lot. The movie Hostel did not help, where everybody's getting murdered left and right. Now there's a lot of, oh yeah, maybe don't watch it, Chris.
Okay.
Now hostels are can be very nice. Some of them are very
Right.
nice, and a lot of them have private rooms with ensuite bathrooms. And so if that's your vibe, maybe you're like, I want to sleep by myself. I want to have my own space. I get it. Again, as like a mom with 3 kids, I want my own room with
Right.
nobody bothering me, no sounds. I just want my own room. But then you can leave the room and you can go down to the communal kitchen, or you can go talk to some people. So I think those are also really great options.
When I was in Puerto Rico recently for the TBEX conference, I stayed a few days after, and I stayed at a co-working, co-living space,
Oh, cool.
a place called Outsite, and it's a membership site. You have to join it to stay in an Outsite. And it's again what you're talking about. It's places you could work for weeks or months. And so there's a
Yeah.
desk, there's fast Wi-Fi, there's a ensuite bathroom typically, and
Cool.
a comfortable room. Pretty basic room. It's not fancy. I've stayed
Yeah.
in Brooklyn also in an Outsite. But
Okay.
then when you go there, there's a WhatsApp channel and people are saying, hey, we're getting together for brunch on Sunday. If you're interested, meet us in the lobby. And went out for brunch with a completely random group of people, just four of
I
us
love
that
that.
went for brunch. But it is that mixture that
Yeah.
I think can be an interesting mix.
And I love that because it takes the edge off too. It's
Right.
one thing to be traveling alone and to jump into a group of 4 people who all know each other already. It's another thing for everyone to be like, we're all alone here. We don't know anybody. I don't know, it's a lot easier, I think, to jump into those scenarios, at least for me, to say nobody here knows anybody else. I'm not the only one who doesn't
Right.
know everyone. I think
Now,
that's lovely.
out of curiosity, on the introvert extrovert scale, Beth is what?
What's funny, I was literally just talking with a friend about this. I said, what did I say? I'm an extrovert who's sometimes an introvert. And she said,
Okay.
no, Beth, you're an extrovert with boundaries. And I was like, I like that. I'm an extrovert who, look, at 8 o'clock at night, you will not convince me to go out. I am going to bed and I will happily do so.
So I'm an introvert. I say a functional introvert. I can be
Love.
extroverted. I can be in a group and meet new people and enjoy doing that, but it's tiring.
Yeah.
The classic definition of introvert, which is
Yeah.
after I'm at the cocktail party, I am exhausted
Yeah.
or tired at least.
Yeah.
I'm more extroverted because of podcasting and spending 19 years doing this and being on press trips and things like that. You don't change your basic nature if you're still time alone is fine.
Yeah. And I fluctuate all the time. And I think that's important to mention because I
Yeah.
think a lot of people think, oh, if you're traveling alone, then maybe being an extrovert, you're having an easier time meeting people, or being an introvert, you're like happier being by yourself, or
Me?
it can work maybe, yeah, but it's not naturally
Right.
attuned for one or another type of person. I think you
Right.
can find value. And that's to your point of, hey, I want to stay and explore and my family wants to go eat ice cream. You do what you want to do. If you want to go meet up with people, there are resources for that.
Right.
If you don't and you want to go to the grocery store and buy a bunch of brie and sit in your hotel room and eat it by yourself, which I have for sure done before on solo trips, absolutely do that. Nobody's going to talk to you. So that option of choosing to be alone,
Right.
to go on a trip alone, that is not something that I think is affected by my desire to be around people or not. I think I can have it both ways, depending on how I want it to be.
Okay, let's get back to the planning. I'm planning any practical tips that I need to know for planning a solo trip.
I think, okay, so in the planning, so first of all, deciding where you want to go and where you want to stay. I
Yep.
think those are very important. I think depending on what kind of person you are, if you are really good at knowing yourself, and I'm thinking about from planning and expenses side, again, you don't have the influence of another person to say, wow, Beth, that's a lot of stuff you're trying to do in one day. Are you sure that you're going to have energy for that? So you do have to step outside of yourself and say, and I actually love to encourage planned and unplanned time. Make sure if you're a planner, plan in unplanned time so that you can be spontaneous and you can. So having a good view of, am I an overspender or an underspender? Let's plan for that.
Right.
Am I going to want to do a lot of things or not? Let's plan for that. Knowing yourself because you are the one who's making the choices.
Then it seems like you'd also need to know if I've got a budget, for instance, if I'm trying to live within a budget, what are the most important things to me? So
what
if
are the
it's
most important things?
that experience, then maybe I will do the brie in the room to save money to do that experience. So knowing what you're trying to get out of it makes sense.
Knowing what you want to spend, what you want to save money on, but also knowing what you're comfortable splurging on. And I will recommend to people in the book in Wonder Woman, I'll recommend to people to have two budgets. One is on your overall budget for your trip of this is what I want to spend. Here's my cap. But then the other budget is after all of the pre stuff is budgeted out or paid for. So pre stuff being your flight, your hotel. Now you still have your daily budget of how much am I spending at restaurants and excursions. So having a sense of both, I think helps give clarity of what's my overall cap here? And then where am I ending up each day after the basics are figured out?
Can you think of one time you got home and were beating yourself up because, Beth, you should have spent that extra N dollars because you got cheap and then you regretted it?
Oh, Yeah, all the time. You know what, though? I'm not the person. I always lean on cheap. I always lean cheap instead of,
Yeah.
and so I'm always like, oh, if you had just literally spent $20, we would have done this by now. I think a
Sure.
really good example
Yeah.
is restaurants.
Yeah.
I'll do that with restaurants where I'll walk around the neighborhood looking at menus and I'll be like, that one's too expensive. And it'll be my husband who will say, we have been walking for 2 hours and you're trying to find the perfect right place. And we could have done so much by now. And we could have, and that's when you realize, and actually, even this is related, but slightly different, which is I talk a lot about negotiating at markets and how
Yeah.
we're taught often, get a deal and make sure you're pushing back. And then sometimes I'll step away and I'll say, I was bargaining over like $1. I mean,
Yeah.
that dollar is way more important to the person that I'm bargaining with than me. Why am I fighting that? So absolutely, I think there are times when you just need to remember, hey, and actually that pursuit for perfection,
Yeah.
I think is something that we have done to ourselves a lot, especially with social media, not to go on a tangent with that, but just there's this idealized version of travel that sometimes we have. And I think we're very afraid of having an average travel experience, like any point in our travel, not having the most amazing meal with the most amazing view. And I actually think we miss out on having a great travel experience if we're constantly looking for this idealized. We're missing all the other stuff, all the really great stuff. And so sometimes I'm walking around the neighborhood for 2 hours trying to find the perfect restaurant that's a mix of budget friendly, but also hole in the wall, beautiful, but also best service ever, but also extremely good food. And it's, wow, I could have had a 9 out of 10 dining experience and 2 other things, but I had to go for the 11 out of 10 experience. And now I'm just.
Hey, Atlanta. Say hello to Small Business Help from Apple. That's right. We're here to make starting and running your business simpler. From helping you choose the right devices to setting them up hassle-free, we can help you build your business in no time. Speak to a business expert and get the help you need at no cost whatsoever. At Apple, we're open for your small business. Go to apple.com/smallbusiness or visit an Apple store to learn more.
Your neighborhood just got cooler with Kroger Delivery's refrigerated trucks. Simply order groceries at the same great prices online as in-store, and we'll bring them to you fresh every time. And if that wasn't cool enough, you can now earn 4 times the fuel points after 4 with your digital coupon. Choose a next-day Kroger Delivery time slot for 4 p.m. or later on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Must deliver by February 4th. Restrictions apply. See Kroger.com for details.
Unreal.
So you're a maximizer, not a satisfizer in terms of your personal. I'm a
I think a lot of us are. That's good. That's a good way to be.
With meals, especially, you give me a menu and I can pick what I'm having often in less than a minute.
Oh, no,
depending
never.
on the size of the menu. Because
I'm going
to eat again tomorrow.
You know what my perfect restaurant is? My perfect restaurant is you go there and they're serving one thing. And that's it. You sit down and that's what you're getting. No decision has to be made. If you want to eat that thing, you go to the restaurant that night. If you don't want to eat that thing, go a different night because they're not serving anything else. I don't want to make one choice. And it's freeing for me to think about. Obviously, sometimes I want to make my own choices. But I think there's so much, oh my God, am I getting the right thing? What if I don't like it? And now I'm like going to be miserable. And now the whole trip is ruined. So being okay with just saying,
at least when you're traveling solo, you'll only be driving yourself crazy, is what you're saying.
My husband is like laughing. Avoided that trouble. No, but yeah, I think it teaches me an important lesson of having grace with myself and saying, you know what, it's okay. Like who are you trying to prove? Who are you trying to show off to? Go and just enjoy it and just sit there and relax and have a good time and let yourself have a good time. And you don't have to optimize all the time.
Excellent. Moving on, now I'm traveling. What do I need to know to get the best out of my solo trip?
The one thing that I really highly recommend for somebody who's traveling alone when they first arrive in a place is something that I call a day zero, which is something I talk about a lot. It's you arrive in your place and you have nothing planned for that first day. Nothing at all. If you cannot imagine living like that, then maybe it's half a day. But I really recommend a full day. And Here's what you do on that first full day by yourself, planning nothing. You take a walk. You walk around your hotel and literally explore the hotel and see what's there. Then you go outside, you make note of where your hotel is. I use hotel, but maybe you're staying wherever, Airbnb, somebody's house, whatever it is. You take a walk and you notice things. You open your eyes. Oh, is that a grocery store across the street? Oh, is that how people use the bus system? Oh, is that a token that you use that you buy from the convenience store in order to use the bus? So a few things are going to happen. One, we've talked about making decisions for yourself and the fact that you have
Right.
to do it.
Mhm.
There's not going to be any other person who says, oh, hey, by the way, Chris, did you notice that there's this cool pass that you can use in order to get unlimited bus rides for free
Right.
or whatever? You have to be that person. So the first objective of day 0 is just let yourself notice the world around you. Don't be so blinders of, okay, we have to go one thing to the next thing to the next thing. Because then when you are actually in a rush to go somewhere and you want to go to the museum that opens at this time and it's almost closing and you got to go, you know how to hop on the bus and get there. You're not figuring it out in the moment. The second thing is I think it's a good safety tactic,
Yeah.
just knowing your surroundings. But then the other thing is I would say, go to a cafe, go stop by the tourist office, pick up a bunch of brochures, sit in a cafe, get something to eat. You're tired, you're hungry. People watch, observe around you. And I think giving yourself time to settle in through jet lag, settle in emotionally, settle into the physical space. I think there's a lot of things that you do when you're planning that when you get there, you're like, oh, wow, that museum is actually right next to that restaurant. And I didn't really realize it looking at a Google map, but actually they're really close to each other. And I should just do both of those in one day. Like sometimes you just have to be there. So I really encourage people when you're alone, when there is so much on your shoulders, to make the decisions, to be responsible for your own safety, to navigate everything, to just give yourself a day to just observe and be present in the space and see what comes to
I
you.
was drawn back to Malta, which was one of my last solo trips, where trying to figure out the bus system, and I was very proud of myself. I got the bus pass. I looked it up. I bought the bus pass. I walked on the first bus, and they said, "You can't use that here."
You're like, what?
No, the TR buses are a different system. That did not come up.
Yeah.
That you'll have those things, and just
Yeah.
learning to deal with them is part of the issue. I
Totally.
also like early on in my trip, for me, probably day 1 is a walking tour or a food tour, so that
Love
I
that.
know the neighborhood, so I know what the options are. You don't want to go to the end of your trip and find out that there was the best restaurant in town was 2 doors down
And
from
you
your
didn't
hotel,
even
and
know.
you didn't even know. Yeah.
Yep. And I love the benefit of having a tour guide who you can just ask questions like, how do you say thank you in the local language? Or what's the exchange rate? I forgot again. Or what would you do if you were here for the first time? Those are great. Oh, I love those as like great day 0, great day 1 activities.
Yeah, with the money, I try and picture which of the things in my wallet is a US 20 equivalent.
Oh,
And
that's
kind of
cool.
base
Yeah.
things around that. Because you've done that. I don't know if you have done it, but I have done it where you're in Vietnam, I think of comes to mind, and you walk away from the ATM machine. You're very jet lagged because you just got there. You're in the airport, and you walk away from the ATM machine, and you've just gotten out thousands of the local currency, and you realize I got $20 because I did the math wrong.
That was me in Iceland. I did not remember to look up the exchange rate. And I remember standing at the ATM going,
Yeah.
I have no idea how much 400 or 10,000 or two, like how much money am I going to be taking out right now?
But we had the opposite of that in Czech Republic, Czechia, I guess it is now, where I was on an amateur travel trip, and one of the people in the group became the Bank of Derek because the default amount at the machine was way too high. It was hundreds of dollars.
Wow.
And so he got out the default thinking it would be a reasonable amount.
Yeah.
And I think he had, I want to say it was $700. I don't remember
Oh, no.
for sure. And so the rest of the trip is don't get any of this group. I have this currency. If you need some, I will sell you some.
Oh, that's amazing. Yep. That's hilarious. It could happen to you, folks.
Yeah. Anything you pack differently when you're traveling solo?
Yeah, I always pack my journal, honestly. My travel journal
Okay.
is my number one companion when I travel alone. It gives me a chance to reflect and think to myself. Other things, I think I try to pack lighter when I travel by myself, only because I know my husband's not going to be carrying my stuff.
Oh, see, that's not the rule in my house is you pack it, you carry it. So
That is what my husband says is the rule, but it's not actually the rule in practice. Let's see, what else would I bring? I think a lot of the things that I typically, I think I just packed savvier when I travel on my own because
Okay.
I have a little bit of a heightened awareness of, I don't have another person who I can say, oh, I ran out of toothpaste. Can I borrow yours? I always bring a travel scarf. I love having a big square scarf that you can turn into a headscarf or a skirt or a blanket or
Yep.
whatever you need it to be. I always pack in my packing cubes, if anything, just to keep things organized. I always have a spinny wheelie suitcase and like a good sturdy backpack when I travel alone because I
Okay.
do not want my gear failing me. I think that's very important as well. Yeah.
So you're going for 2 weeks. How many outfits do you pack?
I will pack usually, okay, if I'm really being smart and I'm packing light and I'm packing carry on only, I will pack for a week max ever.
Same here.
And then I will just wash and reuse accordingly.
Do
I
you
don't think I've ever
have
packed for
things
2 whole
that are
weeks.
easy to wash if you don't find laundry? Do you have any?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't wear fancy stuff ever.
But I think
Why?
of, for instance, jeans are hard
Like
to
dry
wash out
clean
in the
only. Oh, that's fair. Yeah.
right. Not that
Yeah.
they need to be dry cleaned, it's just they don't dry.
Quick dry.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I actually wear a lot of dresses. I wear a lot of like maxi dresses when I
Okay.
travel. I find them to
As
be
a guy, I
pretty
don't
easy
know
to
what
kind
that
of
is,
spread
but
out.
okay.
A maxi dress is like a long dress, but they're
Okay.
usually like cotton. It's
Yeah.
like a long sundress.
Cotton
full-length
is nice
sundress.
in terms of
Yeah, I'll do
overnight
that.
sort of thing. Yeah.
I won't wear like too much. I wear layers, right? And things,
Yeah.
I try to keep things under a general color scheme so you can swap in and out, do we call a capsule wardrobe.
Okay.
So then everything pretty much goes with everything and you can mix
So if
and
I was
match.
with you for 2 weeks on the tour, I might see the same 7 outfits, but they might be in different combinations. So
Exactly.
they look different. Okay. Got it.
That's right. Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll bring some just like chunky accessories so that then, yeah, you can dress up or dress down an outfit for going out at
And what is a
night or not.
chunky accessory then? We're
Like
talking
big,
necklaces and
kind of bold, yeah, necklaces
Okay.
or statement jewelry. Or
and these are your
that will be
diamonds,
what I
I'm
buy for
assuming?
myself. My diamonds. Yes. Always bring your diamonds, girls
Okay.
and boys. No,
Pearls.
do not, as we know, that is important. Do not bring anything of value. Do not bring your grandmother's wedding ring that you would die if you lost. Don't bring any of that. We know that. Don't bring heels. I don't think bringing heels is smart unless you have a legit reason. I have a rule that's use half of it or buy what is it? Bring half of it or use all. So bring half of what you need. So
Yeah.
we just talked about going for 2 weeks, bring a week's worth of clothes. You don't need all of it, but also use everything that you have. So
Yeah.
if you're going somewhere and you're bringing like a pair of heels just in case, no, bring a pair of flats that you know you're going to use that can work for a fancier occasion.
Right.
Don't bring something that you might just in case use. It's a waste of space. You're carrying it. It's extra. It's a burden.
Right. As we start to look at wrapping this up, what else should people know before they head out on your first solo trip? We're going to go out to dinner first just to get used to being with ourselves.
Yes. So there are some things that you can practice gearing up. I think
Yeah.
going out to dinner is a good one. But I also think to the point of travel can be anywhere at any time. Your first solo trip does not have to be you going to Tibet for the first time from Boston and traveling all this way. And it could be driving 90 minutes outside of your hometown. It could be a weekend trip. And that actually, I think, let that be your first experience. Don't have your first solo
Sure.
experience be that big bucket list thing that all of this pressure is on, because it's just going to drive you crazy. So build up that travel muscle. Spend a day by yourself. Just take a whole day and use those as mini trips. So
Yep.
spend time actually mapping out how you're going to get from place to place, much like you would do on a trip. Go take yourself out for dinner, much like you would do on a trip. Even if you want to go crazy, get all your documents together and share them with your best friend or your partner as if you were traveling somewhere much farther, so that you can get into the habit of what information do I want to
Right.
share with friends and family? What practices do I want to keep in mind? How am I going to be doing this when the real time comes? And it just makes it a little bit easier and more digestible for that bigger trip. I think a lot
And
of people, that solo trip, they're thinking
You say
it's gonna be
documents
big.
together. Do you have someone at home who has a copy of your itinerary?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I usually have someone who has a copy of my itinerary and all of my flight confirmations.
Oh,
So that,
interesting. Okay.
yep, so that if they need to check in on a flight that I was supposed to be on and I'm not on, they know what flight that was. Or if something
Okay.
happens, I think sometimes you hear in the news and you're like, oh my God, was that my friend on that flight? I don't know. And then you can look and be like, oh, it wasn't. So I'm not blasting it out to an email list,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I'm giving
yeah,
it to my
yeah.
husband so that
Right,
he's
sure.
got some record of where I am if I have that. And usually I do. Usually I have like where I'm staying mapped out. Some people
Yeah,
don't, but
sure.
I always have where I'm staying mapped out.
The other thing I was thinking of when we were talking about packing is I pack from a list. And the advantages of that is there's some options in the list. This is warm weather parts, these are cold weather parts. But the option is then you go on the trip, you go back to the list and say, I didn't need to bring that. I'm going to take that off my list. And so you're perfecting your next trip by thinking about it after your trip.
I love that. And then, yeah, and then you just use that list
Yep.
the next time around and you're like, this is me who's thought through this and been through this, and it's great.
Yep.
Yeah. And a lot of that is right. I think you can get much of that list just going. Yeah. Just even I've thought about, I haven't done this, but I've thought about if you really don't know how much to pack, then
Right.
yeah, take a weekend trip and then just take account of what did I actually use for the
Right.
amount of days that I was there. And was this suitcase actually too heavy for me? Did I totally overpack? And now I know that I'm an overpacking kind of person. And so to keep that in mind
Right.
when I think all the things, I would even suggest let's go like full 90s and just try not to even use your phone. Just try to go like Amazing Race and just ask for directions. The great thing is you can turn your phone on anytime you want and Google Map your way back home. So I think giving yourself moments
As long as you have a plan
as
that
long
it
as you
covers
have
it
a
or an
plan.
eSIM or something, yes.
Well, I'm talking about if you're going 90 minutes away from home, you can
Yep.
practice the art of just asking for directions and knowing that if all else fails, you can go home. But you're
These
right.
days, won't people tell you just look on your phone?
Yes, they will absolutely tell you to do that. But sometimes, have you been in a situation, Chris, where you're overseas and your phone died, like the
Oh,
battery
sure.
died
Yeah.
because you couldn't charge because it didn't charge because whatever
Yeah.
the power cable you had, that has happened before. And then, yeah, and then it's like you do have to go back to the, okay, how do I get back to where I am? Or how do I find somebody with a charging cable?
Yeah, no,
It's
I have a
not
good
so
sense of
serious.
direction, which helps. So I've looked
Oh,
at
I
a
have a
map.
terrible sense of
Yeah.
direction. So
So
that's good.
as we go to wrap this up, your best solo trip ever.
My best solo trip ever was to Tel Aviv.
Oh,
It was my first trip as a mom. I had my daughter who was, I think she was 11 months old at the time. I had been nursing and it was a retreat that I was going to, but then I spent a couple days by myself in Tel Aviv before the retreat started. And I remember from an identity perspective, as a new parent, I was so wrapped up in like being a mom and I had the worst, it was horrible to leave. I was crying like the whole time. I was like, why am I doing this? Like my daughter's without me. Mom. And then I got there and I found a free walking tour, a Sandeman's walking tour
Been on
in
that.
downtown old city of Jaffa.
Yeah.
And I went on this tour and then I got a cappuccino and I sat in the cafe by myself and I was people watching. And then I went through the big old flea market and I bought myself a necklace and I thought about buying something for my daughter. And I was like, no, this is for me. This is and it was like, I found myself again. And I still remember that feeling of realizing. And that's why I say putting yourself outside of your context. For that whole year, the only way I saw myself was as somebody's mom and as somebody's wife. And it was such a beautiful relief to be able to just be me and remember who I was and what I like to do and to have fun and to not have somebody needing me in that moment. And I will never forget how that felt.
Excellent. Beth, I know you have to go. You're actually 4 minutes late for another meeting here. Thank you so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us some tips for solo travel. Where can people read more or hear more about your wisdom of solo travel?
You can find me on Instagram at MaximumBeth or check out my book. It's called Wander Woman. You can find it at thewanderwomanbook.com.
like to thank the sponsors of this episode and the patrons of the show who help support it and give me some flexibility to try new things like this. If you're interested in becoming a patron of the show, go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. In terms of plans for more travel, one is my wife hates the name, so if you've got a better idea for a name for this, let me know. Two is I'm planning to do more episodes about topical things that have come up that people have suggested. So if you have suggestions for topics you would like to hear discussed on these segments, please do let me know. If you have a guest in mind, also let me know that. I also may use some of this for some travels that I do that don't fit into our usual 1 week itinerary things, short press trips and things like that, just to give you some update on things that I've learned that may not fit into our usual format. For questions and comments, email host@amateurtraveler.com or leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not.